boy rescues a baby from the trash, noticing a disturbing mark, and hurries to the hospital. The doctor is horrified upon identifying the mark. The October wind crossed the narrow streets of Ashland with a coldness that stuck little needles of ice into Nathan's face. It was 7:30 in the morning, and he was heading to school, clutching his coat to his chest and keeping his backpack securely strapped to his shoulders. His sneakers made a hollow sound on the damp pavement. Out of habit, I took a shortcut through an alley between two old buildings. It wasn't exactly an inviting place, but it saved almost 10 minutes of walking, and on those increasingly cold days that made a difference. This stretch used to be quiet, just stacked cardboard boxes, metal trash cans, and the distant murmur of traffic on the main street. But that morning something was different. Upon entering the alley, Nathan noticed an uncomfortable silence. There was no metallic sound of a can kicked by the wind, nor the subtle noise of dry leaves dragged across the ground. He stopped, frowning. The air felt thick, a strange kind of stillness that made him look over his shoulder. No one behind him, just emptiness. It was then that he heard a muffled, irregular sound, almost a faint sob. At first, he thought it was a cat meowing, but as he got closer, he realized it was a much thinner, more delicate cry. His stomach tightened. A baby crying? In a cramped, fetid alley? The very idea was absurd. Still, Nathan took a few more steps, wavering between curiosity and fear. The crying repeated, so low that he had to tilt his head to hear better. His gaze swept over the pile of damp trash bags leaning against the brick wall. Further ahead, an old, dirty blanket lay on a pile of debris. Underneath that threadbare fabric, something was moving. Nathan felt his pulse quicken. His father had always said not to get into trouble, but how could he ignore that? A baby, so defenseless. There in the trash? He swallowed and approached carefully. The smell was sour, a mixture of rotting food, mold, and a faint metallic odor, possibly dried blood. He caught his breath, reached out and lifted a corner of the blanket. Beneath him, a newborn. Pale skin, half-closed eyes, a weak, intermittent cry that sounded more like a desperate whisper. He couldn't have had more than a few days to live. Nathan's heart sank in his chest. How could anyone have done that? Leave him there out in the open, in the dirt? He barely knew how to hold a baby. But when he saw that little life so fragile, he didn't hesitate. Before picking him up, something caught his attention. On his tiny ankle, there was a reddish scratch, as if a bracelet had been forcibly ripped off. The skin was irritated, with a trickle of blood already clotted. That didn't seem accidental. It was a strange and disturbing mark, a sign that the baby had been in contact with a hospital environment or something similar, and that someone had deliberately removed the identification. Nathan felt a lump in his throat. What did this mean? I was sure I couldn't waste time trying to understand. The baby needed immediate help. He adjusted the child's position in his arms, an almost instinctive care, trying to protect him from the freezing wind. The small body was incredibly cold, and it made him move faster. The hospital wasn't very far away, 4 or 5 blocks at most. If he ran, he could get there quickly. He took one last look at the empty alley, filled with a silent anger and a sadness he couldn't even explain. Then he turned and began walking, at first slowly, then accelerating. His footsteps echoed on the damp asphalt. His breath formed white clouds before his eyes. With the baby against her chest, her priority was to get there before it was too late. Every second seemed to weigh more. He thought about shouting for help, but at that time there were few passers-by, and panic could confuse him even more. Better to follow, focus on the destination. The Ashland Hospital had a pediatric emergency room. He remembered passing by a few times. There had to be doctors, nurses, people capable of saving the baby, finding out what that mark meant and making sure everything was okay. I felt my heart beating in my ears. I was scared but determined. It didn't matter what came next. Questions, accusations, bewilderment. What mattered now was getting to the hospital as quickly as possible. And with that firm thought, Nathan crossed the end of the alley, leaving behind the place where life had almost been discarded as trash, but which he, out of impulse and compassion, was now trying to save. Crossing the damp asphalt with shaky steps, Nathan almost collided with a distracted cyclist as he turned the main corner leading to Cedar Grove Hospital. The man cursed something, but the boy didn't even register. I was focused on protecting the baby from the biting wind and keeping my pace steady. The pain in my arms increased with each block, not because of the weight, but because of the tension. The tiny, cold body in his arms made it clear that there was no time to waste. Finally, he saw the building with light walls and green signs. The hospital wasn't big, but it had a well-equipped emergency room, or at least that's what people in the neighborhood said. As he approached the automatic glass doors, a peculiar aroma of antiseptic and disinfectant began to replace the acrid smell of the alley. With his heart pounding, Nathan entered the lobby, his eyes still getting used to the intense white light of the corridors. There were few people at reception at that time of the morning. A nurse in a light blue uniform, sitting behind a counter, was talking on the phone. Two patients sat waiting, looking bored or tired. Upon noticing the boy coming in with a strange package in his arms, the nurse frowned. Her eyes darted from Nathan to the small, pale face visible above the dirty cloth wrapping the baby. "Please help," Nathan shouted, his voice strangled. I found a baby in the trash. He is very weak." The nurse immediately dropped the phone. Her eyes widened. Within seconds, she ran up to Nathan, her expression incredulous. The patients in the room raised their heads, trying to understand what was happening. Without hesitation, the nurse held out her hands, but Nathan, still trembling, took a second to give in to that small body that had clung to his memory in such a short time. "My God," murmured the nurse, examining the baby carefully. "Stay calm, boy. Let's take care of him." She turned and called another nurse, who approached, pushing a metal cart. Quickly, the baby was placed on the padded surface, and the two began checking vital signs, making their way down the hallway to the pediatric emergency area. Nathan followed them for a few steps, but soon a third nurse, older and with a tight smile, raised her hand, blocking his path. "Wait here, please. You did the right thing, but now we need to work." "What is your name?" "Nathan," he stuttered, still trying to catch his breath. "Please, will he be okay?" The nurse tilted her head, promising nothing. "We don't know. Let's do what we can. I'll ask someone to come talk to you. In the meantime, sit down." "He seems shaken." "Shaken?" The word sounded weak to describe the turmoil in Nathan's chest. He let himself be guided to a plastic bench against the wall. His knees were shaking. He looked around. The reception was now in an uproar. Doctors in white coats hurried past. A stretcher ran towards a room with double doors. The baby had disappeared in this whirlwind, swallowed by the clinical mechanism of emergency. Nathan let his head hang, breathing still heavy. He remembered the baby's expression, his cold skin and that strange mark on his ankle. How could this happen here in Ashland, a quiet town? What if I had ignored the crying? If I had gone straight to school pretending not to hear anything? A few minutes later, a kind-looking resident approached with a glass of water. She was young, brown hair tied in a hasty bun, deep circles under her eyes. He bent down to Nathan's face. "Are you well?" he asked, placing the glass in his hands. "Drink a little, it will help." Nathan obeyed, the water running cold down his dry throat. "I found the baby in the trash. I don't know what to do now. Will he die?" The resident shook her head cautiously. "We don't have complete information yet, but you did the right thing by bringing him here so quickly. It was very brave. The doctor taking care of him is experienced and will do his best." He wanted to believe. He felt a little calmer, but the uncertainty was a dull knife piercing slowly. I needed to know something more. Who was that baby? Why that mark, that irritated skin on the ankle? As Nathan drank the water in short sips, he heard the murmurs in the hallway, the rush of rubber shoes against the shiny floor, the muffled sound of doors opening and closing. Then, almost imperceptibly, he heard the baby's cry again, this time more distantly, coming from somewhere inside the hospital. It was a weak but persistent cry. Nathan squeezed the glass between his fingers. This meant that at least the baby was still alive. That was enough for now. Unable to do anything but wait, Nathan tried to fix his gaze on a fixed point on the wall, while the world spun around him in a whirlwind of unanswered questions. Behind the double doors of the pediatric ward, Dr. Thomas Jacobs adjusted the mask over his face as the surrounding staff prepared the newborn. He was a middle-aged man, gray hair at his temples, eyes tired but attentive. In more than 2 decades of practice, he had seen things he would rather forget. Cases of negligence, violence, extreme poverty. Still, nothing fully prepared him for finding a baby pulled from the filth of the trash, cold and defenseless. The nurse responsible for the initial care gave him a summary of what they knew. Found by a boy on the street, possibly abandoned a few hours ago. No name, no identification. The baby was hypothermic, dehydrated, and very weak. The team had already started gradual warming and intravenous fluids. Now Dr. Jacobs carefully assessed every physical detail, searching for clues. "Put the light closer," he asked, leaning over the baby's little leg. The experienced fingers touched the ankle, where a red scratch interrupted the smooth surface of the skin. It looked like a thin, linear irritation, with small crusts of dried blood at the edges. The doctor frowned. This wasn't just an accidental scratch. The nurse leaned over to get a better look. "It looks like something was ripped out. Maybe an ID tag?" Dr. Jacobs clenched his jaw, his stomach knotting. He knew that brand well. It was the type of injury caused when someone forcibly removed a newborn's hospital bracelet, the kind that bears the mother's name, day of birth, and hospital identification number. Why would anyone take it away like that? The possibility that the baby had recently been in a hospital and then abandoned made her blood run cold. Who would do such a thing? He examined the baby's face, the color of its lips, the texture of its still dirty skin, and felt a hint of anger mixed with sadness. Gently, he lifted the eyelid to assess the pupil's reaction to the light, checking that there were no signs of trauma. The child was alive but extremely fragile. If Nathan hadn't found her, the chances of survival would be slim to none. "We need to notify the authorities immediately," he said, his voice serious, "and check our records. If this child has been to a hospital in the region in the last few days, there will be some record. An identification, a medical history. It is not possible for a newborn to disappear without leaving a trace." The nurse nodded, already taking her cell phone out of her coat pocket to contact the administration. Meanwhile, Dr. Jacobs turned his attention to the vital signs on the monitor. Heart rate was low but stabilizing with heat and fluids. The baby moaned softly, a sound that hurt the doctor's ears, already accustomed to loud and vigorous cries from healthy newborns. This cry was so weak, so full of despair, that Jacobs wanted to press his fist against the counter. In his mind, the image of the boy who brought the baby returned. A boy probably scared, but brave enough to act. Jacobs felt gratitude for this stranger who interrupted his own routine to save a life. Maybe later she could talk to him, better understand the circumstances of the find, but first she needed to make sure the child survived. Minutes later, the nurse returned, worried. "I notified the administration and they are checking the files. The police are also on the way. But, doctor, what do you think could have happened?" Jacobs took off his disposable gloves, throwing them in the appropriate trash. "I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that mark on the ankle suggests that the baby was under medical care recently. Maybe he was born here or in another nearby hospital. Someone took him out of the unit without being discharged, ripped off his bracelet to prevent identification, and then abandoned him. I just don't know if it was out of desperation, malice, or something else." The nurse felt a shiver. It was horrible to imagine that the child had access to care and then been deprived of it in such a cruel way. "What do we do now?" "Let's continue stabilizing the baby. Afterwards, we will carry out more detailed examinations. If there are any pre-existing medical conditions, we need to know urgently. And we will cooperate with the police." This child didn't appear out of nowhere. At a signal from the doctor, the team adjusted the mobile incubator to provide the safest environment. Dr. Jacobs came closer again, looking at the small face. He felt his own breathing heavy. Inside, a mixture of horror and indignation boiled. It was not enough to abandon a newborn. It was necessary to deprive him of any identification, as if he wanted to erase his existence. It reminded him of the worst of human nature. Walking away, the doctor took a deep breath. There was a lot of work to do, and in the hallway he knew that a boy was waiting for news, as shaken as everyone there. First of all, they needed to save this child, and then try to understand what exactly that mark on the ankle meant, what was lost and gained by removing a simple bracelet, by throwing away such a vulnerable life. Nathan was sitting on a plastic bench against the hallway wall, just a few feet from the reception desk crowded with phones, printers, and hurried voices. The hospital, previously a neutral place in his mind, now seemed like a tense scene, full of people running from one side to the other. He clutched the empty glass in his hands, the plastic creaking, as he tried to control his breathing. With every second that passed, images of the alley, the baby, and the strange mark on her ankle came to mind, on a persistent loop. He didn't know how long it had been since he handed the child over to the medical team. Maybe 10, 20 minutes? Felt like hours. He looked at the wall clock hanging above the reception. Just after 8 in the morning. He would probably be late for school, and that finding sounded pathetic given the gravity of the situation. How could he worry about math class when a baby was fighting for his life just a few feet away? It was then that he heard his name. A deep, familiar voice called, "Nathan!" When he looked at the hospital entrance door, he saw his father, Richard, walking quickly. He was a man in his early 30s, wearing jeans and a worn leather jacket, his expression confused and distressed. Recognizing it, Nathan felt a strange relief, an anchor in a sea of uncertainty. "Father," he said, getting up. I. Before he could finish, his father placed a hand on his shoulder, looking him up and down, his eyes darting down the hallway. "What happened? They called me from school saying that you didn't show up and—" The voice trailed off when he noticed the tension on his son's face. "Are you well? I heard you brought a baby here. A baby found in the trash?" Nathan nodded, his throat dry. "I found him in the alley near the convenience store. He was crying so weak. I brought him here as quickly as I could." Richard let out a long sigh, shaking his head. "My God, Nathan. It's horrible. Are you hurt?" The boy denied it, blinking hard to ward off the tears that threatened to well up. "I am fine. I'm just worried. I don't know how the baby is now. The doctors didn't tell me anything." The father was about to respond when a tall man in a dark suit approached. He had a badge attached to his jacket pocket. At his side, a woman with attentive eyes and soft features, wearing a gray sweater and carrying a thin folder of documents. When they spoke, their voices were calm but direct. "Good morning, sir." "And you must be Nathan," said the man. "I'm Detective Warner, from the local police. This is social worker Claire. We understand you found the baby?" Nathan swallowed hard, involuntarily squeezing his father's shoulder. Richard came forward. "Yes, my son found the baby in the alley, alone. He brought him straight here. What will happen now?" Detective Warner gave Nathan an appraising look, then turned to his father. "First, we need to understand the circumstances. Nathan, can you tell us exactly what happened? Could be right here, we just need a few details." The boy took a deep breath, trying to put everything in order. She told, with a trembling voice, about the way to school, the weak crying, the pile of rubbish, the discovery of the baby wrapped in the dirty blanket. He explained that he had noticed the strange mark on the ankle, something that seemed to indicate the forced removal of a bracelet. Throughout the story, social worker Claire took brief, silent notes. When he finished, he felt empty. Detective Warner nodded thoughtfully. "You did the right thing, Nathan. Thanks to you, this baby has a chance. Now we need to investigate what happened. We want to understand whether the baby was kidnapped from a hospital, whether he was the victim of a crime. This may take time." "And the baby?" Nathan asked, his voice a thread. "Is he going to be okay?" Claire took a step closer, her soft gaze falling on the boy. "We can't guarantee it yet, but the doctors are doing their best. I know it's difficult, but you must trust their work. They are experts. As soon as we have updates, we can let you know." Nathan nodded, feeling the weight of helplessness. He had saved the baby, but now everything was out of his control. He looked up at his father, who squeezed his shoulder tighter, trying to reassure him. There was an uncomfortable silence in the hallway, broken only by the distant noise of monitors and the comings and goings of nurses. "Let's stay close," Richard said, his voice firm. "We're not leaving until we know if everything's okay." Detective Warner exchanged a knowing look with Claire. Before walking away, he said, "We'll keep you posted. Thanks for your cooperation, Nathan." Seeing them leave, the boy sighed. The feeling of being at the center of something much bigger than himself was overwhelming. But at least he wasn't alone. His father was there, and now the police and social worker were involved too. All that was left was to wait, hoping that the baby would survive. And, meanwhile, Nathan tried to hold on to the only certainty he had. His decision to act was right. Everything that would happen next, well, it was a painful and inevitable mystery. Nathan was sitting next to his father on 2 chairs lined up against the wall, near a water fountain. All around, the constant buzz of calls, hurried footsteps and ringing phones created an unsettling background. The boy felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and adrenaline. He wanted news about the baby, any detail that would help him understand what was really happening. So far, all he had were questions. Every now and then, I chanced to glance down the hallway that led to the pediatric ward. The double doors were still closed, and no one had come to give updates since the police and social worker had left. His father, Richard, also seemed impatient, but tried to remain calm. Sometimes he would pat his son on the shoulder or sigh loudly, as if to remember he was there. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a nurse appeared pushing an empty stretcher and, upon seeing them, stopped. It was the same nurse who had attended to Nathan at reception, with her face still worried. He approached, speaking quietly. "The doctor is working on the baby's case. He asked to let you know that, as soon as he has something more concrete, he will come and talk to you. Please be patient. The child is being examined very carefully." Nathan nodded, swallowing the emptiness in the pit of his stomach. "At least, is he alive?" he ventured. The nurse bit her lower lip. "Yes, he is alive and receiving support. Try to stay calm. Okay?" With that, she disappeared down the hall, leaving them guessing once again. Richard let out a long sigh, stroking his son's hair. "This is better than nothing. At least we know they didn't give up. They are doing their best." Before Nathan could respond, the doors opened again, this time with Dr. Jacobs appearing on the other side. He looked tired. The lines on his face deepened. He came close, removing the surgical mask and putting it in the pocket of his coat. "Nathan, sir." He nodded to his father, not knowing his name, but understanding was in his eyes. "The baby is stable for now, but in a delicate condition. We start fluids, warm up and check for signs of possible illness or deficiencies. We have some clues." Nathan's heart sped up. "What kind of clues?" Dr. Jacobs breathed in, choosing his words carefully. "The mark on the ankle made us suspect that the baby was removed from a hospital environment. We asked the registry department to check recent births and possible disappearances. Although there is still nothing conclusive, one of the nurses identified a case that occurred a few days ago. A newborn disappeared without being discharged from a hospital in the region. We still don't know if it's the same baby, but the dates and characteristics match." Richard frowned. "It disappeared? Does that mean someone took it without permission?" "It's likely," confirmed the doctor, crossing his arms. "If it is the same case, this baby needed medical monitoring. Perhaps he suffered from a rare condition that had not yet been fully diagnosed. The disappearance interrupted early treatment. This makes the situation even more serious. We will need specific tests to confirm, but we have already contacted the police and the administrative team." Nathan felt a shiver. It was as if, by removing that bracelet, someone had tried to erase the baby's identity. Why? What would drive someone to risk the life of a newborn? "Is he going to be okay?" he insisted. Dr. Jacobs paused painfully before answering. "I can't guarantee it, but we are doing everything in our power. We need more information about the mother or family medical history, anything that will help determine the correct treatment. Without this, we move forward in the dark." Richard squeezed his son's shoulder, seeing the anguish on his face. Is there anything we can do? At the moment, not much. Police and social workers are working on this aspect. You have already done a lot in getting the child here quickly. I would like you to understand that although the system is slow, all the gears are moving now. Police, hospital, social services. Everyone wants to save this baby. Nathan felt torn between the relief of knowing that so many people were involved and the frustration of not having control over anything. And, did you find out anything about that brand? He asked, referring to the scratch on his ankle. Everything indicates that it was the same mark as the hospital bracelet. This tells me that someone wanted to erase the baby's origins, explained the doctor. It could be an act of desperation, trying to prevent the child from being identified and returned to the hospital. Or something more sinister we don't know yet. A heavy silence fell over them. Finally, Dr. Jacobs placed a hand on Nathan's shoulder. You did what you could. If it weren't for you, this baby probably wouldn't be alive right now. I came back to let you know that we will be carrying out new tests, and as soon as we have any news I will inform you again. I suppose you want to wait? Richard looked at his son, who nodded. We will stay as long as necessary. The doctor nodded and walked back down the hall. Father and son remained seated, while the wheels of mystery turned, slowly but inevitably. From now on, every second of waiting would also be an invitation to reflection. Who was this child? Why was he abandoned, and what secrets did that strange mark carry? The answer was still hidden, somewhere between the baby's past and the uncertain present of a hospital desperately trying to save him. Time seemed to have stretched into invisible elastic bands. Nathan, sitting in the same plastic chair, watched the hospital move in cycles. Nurses coming and going, doctors disappearing behind doors, patients arriving, others leaving. Outside, the morning continued its course, but inside everything revolved around that anonymous baby. His father, Richard, had gotten up to get water from the fountain and now returned with a glass for him. Here, son, he said, handing over the glass. You need to stay hydrated. Nathan accepted the water, but the taste was flat, almost bitter in his dry throat. I wanted news, more solid information. So far, what did they have? A baby found in the trash, a mark indicating the forced removal of a hospital bracelet, the suspicion that the baby needed special medical care. Everything was still hazy. The boy looked at his watch. It must have been more than an hour since he arrived there. As if sensing their anxieties, social worker Claire appeared in the hallway, accompanied by Detective Warner. Nathan's father looked up immediately, and the boy felt his heart quicken. Maybe now they would come with more concrete answers. Did you get anything? Asked Richard, voicing his son's concerns. Claire took the lead, her voice soft. Well, we're still gathering data. The hospital checked records from the last few days. There was the case of a newborn who disappeared without being discharged from a nearby hospital, St. Mary's, about 3 days ago. The characteristics matched the baby found. Approximate age and need for monitoring due to possible health complications. But we still can't be completely sure that it's the same. Why not? Nathan wanted to know, holding the glass tightly. Detective Warner responded this time. Details remain to be confirmed, such as the type of bracelet used, time of disappearance, and especially the identity of the mother. St. Mary's is gathering information. Additionally, we need to confirm the baby's specific medical condition. Without this, we cannot close the puzzle. There may be more than one case of abandonment, unfortunately. We have to be careful. Nathan felt a chill when he heard the possibility of more cases like that. It was disturbing to think that babies could be abandoned so easily. And the baby's condition? Richard asked, his voice cautious. Any improvement? Dr. Jacobs is performing additional tests, Claire explained. He believes the child may have a heart condition or something related to immunity. We still don't know. As soon as we have something concrete, we will let you know. Hearing this, Nathan remembered the doctor's tired look, the tension visible on his face. It felt like a fight against time, against the unknown. He silently thanked Dr. Jacobs and the team for their dedication, even though he could do nothing but wait. Warner straightened his jacket, his expression closed. We are investigating. Don't worry, what you did was of great help. Thanks to Nathan, the child has a chance. I'll check to see if the St. Mary's records have been sent. Excuse me. The detective walked away, and Claire, before leaving, placed her hand on Nathan's shoulder. I know it's hard to wait, but remember, without you, the baby wouldn't be here. You gave him new hope. Try to hold on to that even without all the answers right now. Nathan exhaled slowly. It was a small but welcome consolation. Claire walked away, disappearing down a side hallway. Now it was just him and his father, once again immersed in the buzz of the hospital. Son, Richard began, his voice low, sitting next to him. I know you want everything resolved now, but things don't work so quickly. This type of case is complex. People are trying to do the right thing, but there is protocol, bureaucracy. It's not like in the movies, where everything is resolved in minutes. Nathan swallowed. I understand, Father. I just wanted to know who this baby is. Why would someone do this to him? It's so unfair. Richard pulled him into a light hug. It's really unfair. But his gesture was not. You saved him, Nathan. Now it's time to trust the medical and police team. They want to come up with an answer, I guarantee it. For a moment, they were silent, listening to the sound of gurney wheels on the floor, the click of pens, the distant murmur of patients. Then Dr. Jacobs appeared again, approaching them with firm steps. He had a clipboard in his hand and a look that was still worried, but more centered. There is good news. The baby is reacting a little to the initial care. Body temperature stabilized. Still early, but it's a start. We will collect blood samples and perform specific tests to understand the real medical condition. Once we know, we can seek appropriate treatments. Nathan felt a weight lift off his shoulders. An evolution, even if minimal. What about identity? Asked Richard. Jacobs shook his head. Still nothing concrete. But let's keep trying. For now, we have partial truths. The baby probably came from another hospital, needs urgent care, and is in safe hands now. Give us a little more time. With that, the doctor walked away, leaving them once again with open questions. But now, at least, there was a firmer ray of hope. The baby had responded to treatment. It might be a tiny step, but on this freezing, uncertain morning, any step forward was reason to believe. The clock on the wall read almost 10 in the morning when Detective Warner returned to the hallway where Nathan and Richard were waiting. His step was steady but not hurried, the countenance serious. Beside him, social worker Claire remained silent, holding a folder with her fingertips. Upon seeing them, Nathan stood up immediately, and his father followed him, frowning. We have some news, began Warner, stopping a few steps away from the two. We contacted St. Mary's. There was, in fact, a case of a newborn missing 3 days ago. The mother left the hospital without being discharged, taking the baby, and did not return. No one has seen her since. Records indicate the child had a heart condition being monitored. Nathan felt a shiver run down his spine. So it was the same baby. Confirmed. His father let out a whisper, like, my God, almost inaudible. Why would she do that? Richard asked, his voice full of indignation and incomprehension. Claire cleared her throat. We don't have all the details yet. We know that the mother is young, without stable financial conditions. The nurses at St. Mary's reported that she seemed very anxious and confused and talked about leaving to take care of the baby alone. Doctors insisted that the newborn needed to be hospitalized for longer. One day she simply disappeared, taking her son. That doesn't justify abandoning it in the trash, said Nathan, anger turning his stomach. He expected some level of desperation, but not something this extreme. I agree, it's a terrible act, said Warner. But we want to understand the context. There may have been coercion, domestic violence, or some other factor that led her to make desperate decisions. The investigation is beginning. Finding that mother is crucial. Nathan took a deep breath. She remembered the alley, the cold, the fragile baby and the mark on her ankle. Trying to see her mother not just as a cruel villain, but as someone cornered and confused, was difficult. Still, the idea of something more complex than pure evil hung in the air, making him uncomfortable. The world, he realized, was not black and white. Dr. Jacobs mentioned that the baby had a special condition. Nathan recalled, looking at Claire. If the mother knew this, why risk her son's life by taking him out of the hospital? The social worker sighed. Fear and lack of information often lead people to act against their own interests. Maybe she thought she could take better care of her son at home. Maybe she was afraid of losing custody if she didn't act. We are working with hypotheses. Richard passed his hand over his face, thoughtfully. So, the mark on the ankle comes from the St. Mary's bracelet. Did she remove it to avoid identification? That's the most likely theory, Warner replied. Erase the origin of the baby, make it difficult to connect with the hospital case. If it was just a momentary act of desperation, maybe she wouldn't worry about details like that. There is something strange there. We may be facing a situation in which the mother was forced to abandon the baby, or a network of people were involved. It's still too early to say. Nathan felt a lump in his throat. A network of people? Did someone force the mother to do this? The mere possibility of a more complex crime was frightening. I wanted to scream, demand answers, but I knew everyone was doing their best. He thought of Dr. Jacobs, the nurse, the social worker, the police, all racing against the clock. And the baby? He finally asked, his voice softer. Any changes? Claire looked at the boy with empathy. I spoke briefly with Dr. Jacobs before coming here. He said the baby responded well to some stimuli. There is no final diagnosis yet, but vital functions are more stable. That's a good sign. A breeze of relief blew through Nathan's mind. Despite everything, there was progress. The baby was fighting, resisting. Maybe, with the right help, he could make a full recovery. Let's keep investigating, said Warner. I want to see if we can get images from security cameras near the alley, or information from witnesses. The mother has a name, a record, and we will try to locate her. As soon as we have news, we will return. Nathan nodded, feeling tiredness heavy on his shoulders. It was still so early in the day, but he was already carrying a ton of emotions. His father gave him a firm side hug, trying to comfort him. He realized, with bittersweet clarity, that nothing would be simple. The mother may have been a victim, the baby was certainly a victim, and he himself, an ordinary boy, is now witness to a layered tragedy. The detective and the social worker walked away down the hall, talking in whispers. Father and son were alone again, surrounded by the noise of the hospital. Nathan thought about the missing mother, the baby that resisted, the mark that revealed more than simple abandonment. And, silently, he prayed for the truth to come out, even if it hurt, because only then would the little newborn have the chance of a future that wasn't defined by the darkness of that alley. Nathan was rubbing his hands, sitting next to his father in the same hallway, when Dr. Jacobs returned. The clock now showed almost 11 in the morning. The intense light of the hospital seemed softer, perhaps because of the tiredness that made him see everything with a certain veil of confusion. The medical team continued their constant back and forth, but there was a subtle air of hope. The news that the baby was responding well to stimuli had reached other members of the staff, and the atmosphere was no longer as heavy as before. The doctor stopped in front of them, holding an acrylic clipboard and showing a slightly less tense expression. Still serious, but with a glimmer of restrained optimism. We carried out blood tests and some quick tests. He began, looking directly at Nathan, who, at that moment, seemed to be the person most interested in knowing the child's fate. Apparently, the baby has a mild heart problem, probably a congenital malformation that requires monitoring, but it is not something insurmountable. With the correct treatment, the chances of a healthy life are good. Nathan let out a sigh, feeling the weight in his chest lessen a little. So, he's going to be okay? Still requires care, said the doctor, adjusting the clipboard, but yes, stable and with a good prognosis. Without quick intervention to prevent hypothermia and malnutrition, the outcome could have been tragic. You arrived on time. Richard put his arm around his son, squeezing him lightly. I have no words to thank you, doctor. In fact, you did the hardest part, replied the doctor sincerely. Rescuing the baby was decisive. Now we can take care of the rest. Nathan smiled shyly, but his thoughts soon flew to his missing mother. How would she react to knowing that her son was safe? I tried not to judge her without knowing her situation, but it wasn't easy. Still, what mattered now was that the baby was safe. Before they could ask further, Detective Warner and social worker Claire reappeared, walking quickly down the hallway. Upon noticing Dr. Jacobs, they stopped and formed a small circle with Nathan and Richard, as if they were a team discussing strategies. "We have new information," Warner said, nodding to the doctor and then to Nathan. "We were able to locate a relative of the baby's mother. An aunt, actually. She confirmed that the young mother had serious financial problems and was being pressured by a violent ex-partner to leave the hospital with the child. There are signs of emotional blackmail and threats." The news shook the air between them. Nathan felt a shiver. Then there were more nuances. The mother had not acted alone or out of simple cruelty. Maybe he was trying to escape from someone dangerous, without knowing how to deal with the situation. Claire took the floor. The aunt reported that the mother disappeared after a fight with this man. It is possible that she found herself trapped, without the psychological conditions to take care of the baby, and abandoned him, perhaps believing that someone would find him. It's terrible, but it reveals a more complex context. The police are trying to locate this mother right now. Richard scratched the back of his head thoughtfully. Then she could have been a victim of abuse or coercion. Perhaps he thought he was saving the baby by leaving him where someone could find him. Nathan bit his lip. The idea that this cruel act could have arisen from hopeless desperation bothered him, but it also aroused empathy. It was easier to hate a cruel mother than to try to understand a desperate mother. There was still no justification for putting the child in the trash, but the weight of guilt was fragmented into more complex parts. "What happens next?" Nathan asked, unsure. Dr. Jacobs responded first. "As for the baby, we will continue the treatment, stabilizing him, and soon social services will take over custody. If the mother is found and deemed fit, there may be a reunification, but this depends on many assessments. Otherwise, the baby may be sent for adoption, receiving the assistance he needs." Warner added, "And we will continue the search. There is a warrant to find the ex-partner. If he is involved in coercion or threat, he will be held accountable for it. We will also assess the mental and social condition of the mother, who needs to be held responsible for the abandonment, but also understood in context." Nathan stared at the ground, emotions dancing inside him. He had saved a life, but now he realized that saving a life wasn't just about pulling someone from the brink of death. It was also diving into a tangle of human stories, pain and consequences. There were no fairy tales here, just raw reality. Still, he felt strangely lighter. He had done his part. "I would like to see the baby when possible," he said softly, looking up at Dr. Jacobs. "When he is out of the immediate risk zone, we will schedule a brief visit under supervision," assured the doctor understandingly. "You deserve to see him in better conditions. But this may take a few days." Nathan nodded, accepting the wait. One step at a time. The most important thing now was that the baby was safe and receiving adequate care. As for the rest, mother investigated obscure motives. Time and the authorities would do the best they could. As they walked away, the detective and the social worker continued in search of answers, while Dr. Jacobs was heading back to the medical wing. Nathan and his father sat once again, but the tension that had previously crushed them had eased. The baby would survive. That was enough for now. The world was not simple. The truth hurt. But in that moment a spark of hope shone, reminding them that, even in the darkest alleys, someone could still find a reason to fight for their life. 2 days later, the weather in Ashland was milder. A shy sun streamed through the hospital windows, giving the corridors a golden hue. Nathan and his father returned early that Saturday, as they had promised. The boy had spent the last night almost without sleep, thinking about the baby and what had happened since the moment he found him in that cold alley. The questions that had tormented him before had calmed down, and now he just wanted to see with his own eyes that the child was okay. Dr. Jacobs greeted them at the entrance to the pediatric ward. He looked less tired, although the traces of worry still marked his face. He gestured for them to follow him, guiding them through a corridor that was quieter than the previous ones. Nathan realized that they were on their way to a small glass room, where incubators and hospital cribs housed babies under special care. The baby is still stable, the doctor informed as they walked. We have already started a therapeutic regimen for the heart problem and the response has been positive. He's gained a little weight, he's more ruddy. It is still too early to say what the future will be like, but the prospects are good. Richard nodded, satisfied. That's great, doctor. Thank you very much for your work. It's the job of all of us here, Jacobs corrected with a slight smile. And, of course, your initiative, Nathan. You gave him the chance to reach us in time. Upon hearing this, the boy felt a comforting warmth inside his chest. It wasn't empty pride, but a sense of accomplishment, of knowing that his decision, difficult, scary, driven by the instinct to do what was right, had saved a life. They approached a glass partition. Inside, in a warm crib, the baby rested. There was no longer the dirty blanket, nor the pale and inert face. Now, wrapped in a clean fabric, his skin had a healthier tone, and he breathed softly, his eyes closed. It looked like another baby, although still small, fragile, dependent. Nathan placed his hands on the glass, bringing his face closer. He's so different, he murmured, moved. Yes, Jacobs agreed, keeping his voice low. When you got here, you were on the verge of hypothermia and dehydration. Now, despite the need for constant care, he is already showing signs of recovery. They remained silent for a few moments, contemplating that life that was rising from the depths of hopelessness. Then the doctor added, "The police located the mother last night. She was found in an improvised shelter, very shaken. He is receiving psychological and medical care. The story is complex. There were threats from the ex-partner, lack of resources, panic. This doesn't justify what she did, but it helps you understand. Now authorities and social services will assess the possibility of rehabilitation and support. Nothing is decided. The most important thing is the baby's well-being." Nathan swallowed. It was difficult to imagine the suffering and confusion that led that mother to such a cruel act. But at the same time, I was beginning to understand that people sometimes make terrible decisions under pressure and fear. That the world, after all, is not so simple. What if his mother can't take care of him? He asked softly. Dr. Jacobs shook his head. In this case, the baby will be under the responsibility of social services, who will try to find him a safe home, either with other family members or through adoption. The important thing is that now he will have options, a possible future. Richard squeezed his son's shoulder. Listen, Nathan, you did more than most adults would. Don't forget that. The boy closed his eyes for a second, feeling tears catch on his eyelids. It wasn't sadness, but a strange, deep emotion. Happiness at having done the right thing, mixed with the awareness of how fragile life can be. It was as if he had grown a few years in those few days. Can I visit you again later? Nathan asked, uncertain. He had no rights over the baby after all. It was just a stranger who had found him. Dr. Jacobs smiled understandingly. I think so. When he is stronger, perhaps we can allow him a brief visit. It's a delicate situation, but I'm going to talk to social services. You became part of this story, in a way. Nathan nodded. That was all I needed to hear. It was not in her hands to guarantee the baby's future, but she could hope that he would have a better life than the troubled beginning. And if one day, in the future, I found him healthy again, I would know that his gesture made a difference. Thank you, he said, his voice full of sincerity. I thanked the doctor, the father, the nurses, the police, the social worker. I would also be grateful for having the courage to act, even when I was scared. When they left the hospital, the sun was stronger than when they arrived. The light warmed Nathan's face, illuminating the quiet streets of Ashland. As they walked home, he thought that the world was still imperfect, but that a small act of compassion could change a lot. For now, that was enough. Life moved on, as mysterious as before, but now he knew that sometimes a simple act of kindness could be the key to turning darkness into hope.